Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Is anybody else feeling the intensity of the springtime? It's lovely, actually, in a lot of ways. I think for us, where we live in Southern California, a lot of times we get a lot of what's called May gray and June gloom, which basically is like gloomy gray weather that's like not cold, not hot for like 2 months. And some years it's really bad and some years it's really light. And this year has been not so May gray. I guess we were only in the very beginning. However, I'm happy about that. And I feel like we're still, as many of you know, kind of coming out of the COVID years. And so I feel like the celebration of having things be open and kind of feel more normal than not is just pretty wonderful. And I think because we're all so excited to do stuff, we're all doing a lot of things. And my family happens to have like a lot of birthdays in May. I guess it's 2 to be specific. We have a May 12th birthday, and then we have a May 31st birthday, and then my birthday is in June. So it's just a lot of birthdays and graduations and promotions and transitions from preschool to kindergarten. And also in the case of our family, and completing proton radiation. So that, I'm sure, has a lot to do with my feeling of there is a lot going on. And This episode was a real gift to me to be able to connect to Rachel and to hear her story and to just hear her heart. And so the episode today is an interview style episode, and you get to meet Rachel, who is the mom of a 7-year-old girl, and she will tell you all about her. But more specifically, she's going to share about her experience being the mother of a child with special needs. And she does a really wonderful job of sharing things that have worked really well, but things that are still in process. I really loved that she was open about not having it all figured out just yet. I know for me, it's like, I want to think that I have it figured out because it gives me a sense of safety. And I'm very aware that I don't, but sometimes I have the desire to. And so Rachel shares with us about her whole experience, but we specifically talk about isolation and her experience, both feeling isolated and now really what we're going to call her reinvention phase as she transitions from being very, very, very hands-on to having a season that's expected to be a little bit less hands-on. So it really is opening up opportunities for her where she's getting to kind of rediscover what she's all about. And in this episode, I think you're really going to connect with all the different parts of her journey, wherever you're at. If you're in the very intense season or if you're kind of exploring that reinvention phase, I think this episode has something to offer you. So with that, I'm going to let us begin the episode and welcome Rachel to the show. Rachel, welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Every time I get to have an interview, I don't know, just the idea of connecting with another mom just lights me up. And so thank you so much for making it work in your schedule and for being willing to share your story with our community. So as we get started, I would love to hear a little bit about what makes you and how you identify as a special needs mom. So give us a little picture.
Okay. Well, I have a daughter named Audrey. She's 7 years old. She's our only child. We had no idea that there was anything different. The whole pregnancy, I was young and healthy and had never had an issue. She was our first experience pregnancy-wise. I had a smooth pregnancy. I worked up until my maternity leave, and everything we thought was okay. And then she actually decided to give me a little bit of anxiety while I waited for her arrival because I was certain that she would come early for some reason. I don't know why. My sister, both of her children were early, and my mom never went past her due date. So, and I'm early always for everything. And so I just, for some reason, thought she's coming at least on time, if not early. So she was 41 and a half weeks. I was going to be induced the next day and started having some back labor and wasn't really feeling much movement. So they wanted me to come in. And so anyways, long story short, I labored with her for about 9 hours. And then right after I decided to get the epidural, her heart rate dropped dramatically and they rushed me into an emergency C-section. So that was a bit of a whirlwind. I'd never previously had any type of surgeries. And I always tell everyone, it reminded me of like a Grey's Anatomy episode. It was like the lights. I just remember around me, a team. I mean, there was like 15 doctors that just flew in. And the interesting part about that is because I had just received the epidural, I didn't need to be put under because I was numbed.
Oh gosh.
So
that sounds awful though.
And it's ironic now looking back all the things. And I remember being overdue. not so patiently waiting, just saying, oh, the only thing, I just don't want a C-section. I just don't want a C-section. And she had other plans and everything was okay. She had wrapped herself around the cord, which was why the heart rate dropped, and they were easily able to get her out. But that happened at about 9:35 a.m. and she was born at 10. So it was,
Wow.
I went from thinking I had no progress. They were telling me it was going to be a very long labor. We even told our parents, my mom was there, thankfully, but we even told them, like, don't come, it's going to be a while. And then she was out in 30 minutes from all of that happening. So she came into this world exhausting us and hasn't stopped making us exhausted ever since. She was perfect. She was perfect. She was tiny, which was surprising because she was overdue. She came out at 5 pounds, 9 ounces. And we thought, why is she so tiny? My husband's family is very petite, so it wasn't too crazy, but the fact that she was overdue and my whole entire pregnancy, they were telling me that she was on track for growth. I was nervously thinking I was going to have like a 9 or 10 pound baby every day I went, past my due date. So yeah, that was where our journey started. They were worried about her small head size, the circumference of it. A lot of doctors came in throughout that hospital stay, and we had an extended stay due to my emergency C-section. But otherwise, everything was fine. Her hearing and everything, all the newborn screens checked out. She didn't have to be in the NICU. So other than them scaring us a little bit about the head circumference, we just thought she's tiny. And they just told us to kind of remain vigilant on watching for milestones not being met. And that's where it started. So we brought home what we thought was a typically healthy baby. And my mom gut by about 4 months knew. I have a background in child development. That's where what I did in school. I was a teacher before her and even worked in the special education system for a few years before I had her. So everything my gut was telling me by 6 months that something was going on. She was happy. She was adorable. She was smiley, but little things now looking back, like I had a really hard time nursing her. Now we know is because she has low muscle tone. So she just was not able to get my milk production going enough, but we had no idea why. And I'll never forget, we didn't get her diagnosis until 10 months. So at 9 months, when you have to go to that doctor's appointment and you fill out all the things that your beautiful child is doing, she was doing none of them. No sitting up, no, she was rolling, but not, the back to forth, all the things, no babbling, no mama, no dada, no trying to crawl. She was, obviously we were supplementing at that point. She was tiny. Failure to thrive from birth on. Her head did not grow at all. So her doctor agreed that it was time to do an MRI. And during that scary first MRI that we did with our little 9-month-old, that's when we got her microcephaly diagnosed. And I had never heard of it other than on the news, being related to the Zika virus that was very popular at that time, which I had not traveled or anything. So her neurologist, she did have an anchoid cyst as well that they found, but they told us that was an incidental find and had nothing to do with microcephaly. So from then on is where we started just being referred to all the specialists. We had a neurosurgeon, a neurologist, the genetics team. They didn't know why she had microcephaly because the brain malformations that I guess are usually commonly associated with that, they weren't seeing. So that's why they sent us to genetics. That was a very intensive blood draw, and they had to send it out to a special lab. And that took she was like 10 and a half months. So that took about 6 weeks to hear back from. So that was pretty rough to wait for those results. But the ironic part was during that time, she had already started therapies because she was delayed in her motor skills. So I had her in physical therapy, and we were starting occupational therapy. We're getting on all the lists for child development services and early intervention. And they told me, this is just kind of a protocol. This is the next step. We don't think, literally her geneticist looked at me and said, we don't think we're going to find anything with this blood work, but it's the next thing that we check off. So that was a whirlwind. And then in December of that year, right before her first birthday, we got her diagnosis at about 10 and a half months, and they did it on the phone. It was pretty overwhelming, to say the least. My genetics doctor at the time asked me if I was alone at the house. That's how they started the conversation. And she said, "Are you sitting down?" Yeah. And
Wow.
So it was pretty.
That is not a good way to start a conversation.
Not at all. Not at all.
I've had those conversations, and
yeah, it's just kind of as I'm watching my perfectly beautiful baby sleeping, and my husband thankfully was home. I think he might have been working later that day or something, but he was home. So I told her I wasn't alone. And then she just starts spewing off all the things that she couldn't believe, the mutation that she found in this blood draw. She has never worked with anyone. It's called CASK, CASK, all caps. It's a genetic mutation that my husband and I do not carry. It was just completely random, so they think. And she started spewing off statistics of all the she may nevers. She may never walk, she may never talk, all the things. And so it was kind of like Charlie Brown. I always describe it. I was just responding to her like, yes, just back and forth. That's what my husband's like. I just kept hearing you say yes, but I was just stoic, and I just kind of heard her just flapping out. She's this percentage of seizures are likely. And I mean, just all the things that you never want to hear about your children. So that's where our journey started. And from then on out, it's just been a whirlwind of therapies and specialists. And because it is such a rare diagnosis, we were given the number of 64 total worldwide at her diagnosis date. Since then, we definitely know that there's more out there that aren't being diagnosed correctly because there's so many other things associated with this mutation. Audrey has a mutation, but a lot of others have, there's deletions and there's mosaic forms. So we're learning a lot more about it, but I say we're as in the parents of the CASK children community that I belong to, because nobody knows about it. And it's an odd feeling going to specialists that are supposed to be giving you knowledge, and you tell them with a printout from Google about your daughter's diagnosis, and they're having to look up anything that they see. And so that was where I just really dove into becoming her advocate. And I had decided, I was teaching at the time, and I was on summer break when I started to notice just the developmental stuff. And since we didn't have family immediately close, and I knew that there was, it's a love-hate relationship that I had, that I knew kind of what was ahead of us, being kind of knowing the system from an educational standpoint. I always kind of say, like, being in denial and being naive to things sometimes is better because
I totally agree with that. That is absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of knew that it was going to be, we were in this for the long haul. And although we didn't know exactly what her future would be, and we still don't, I knew it was going to take a lot of work on all of us, and I didn't want to miss that. So we decided to make it work, that I didn't go back to work, and I was with her full time doing all the early intervention, which our early intervention team was incredible. I cried the day that they left when she turned 3. They were amazing. They were my total support system those first few years, coming into our home. It was the only adult interaction I had, to be honest, other than family. So that was a pretty crazy experience. So I could go on and on about this, but I don't know if you have any other questions regarding.
Yeah, no, you're doing, actually, you've been answering some of the questions I had. No, it's wonderful. As you've gone, you answered some of my curiosities. So I'm so glad that you did. So it sounds like you had tinglings of knowing when she was like between 4 and 6 months. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what was the emotional experience like for you when you realized that your daughter may have some challenges or disabilities or some differences?
I think initially it was frustrating when I was concerned, because I think, mom gut is a real thing. And I don't know. I mean, I guess my education maybe did have something to do with it, but I honestly think it was just more of a mom gut instinct, because everyone around me was saying, "Oh, she's perfect. Every baby develops on their own time, and she's great." And there are so many things looking back now that I know. She would never sleep in a car seat. We would go, you go to dinner with a newborn. It's supposed to be the easiest, right? And now thinking back, it was compared to now, but you always see the babies in the bassinet sleeping through dinner, or you go somewhere out and about. My baby was waiting for the world, like she just eyes wide open. And we joked about it, like she's just such a people watcher. She's an observer. She doesn't want to. She's a party girl. She doesn't want to miss
She's
anything.
an extrovert of all extroverts. That's so funny.
Yes. But she wouldn't sleep in the car. She had to be rocked. Just so many little things. Feeding was such an issue. And I remember when we started to find some stuff out, my mom telling me later that she thought that it was, that Audrey was so different. She had other grandkids at the time, and she's like, and obviously raised three. I'm one of three siblings. And she said, I always thought it was, different or interesting that she never just downed a bottle. She never finished a bottle completely. Her low muscle tone was the reason, but we didn't know that. And she says, I can just picture all my babies and, just downing that milk bottle and just being that milk drunk that she just never really was. But, once again, she's tiny. She maybe just doesn't need that much. And, all those things, first time mom. So, and even in the womb, I look back and I see my pregnant belly, and then I see my friends that are pregnant more recently. And I'm like, I was tiny. My belly was not big, and that should have been the first thing. But, everyone carries different. I stayed really healthy during my pregnancy. I loved to work out, and I continued, to exercise, and I felt great my whole pregnancy. So I was doing things, just like how I had been. So I just thought, oh, great. I'm doing a good job at not, packing on the pounds with this pregnancy. And nope, it was because my daughter's head, was not big. And you think about a baby, microcephaly just means underdeveloped head. And you think of a baby, and the biggest portion of a baby is usually their head. And
that's true, actually.
So anyways, I mean, who knows, if I would have carried the same regardless of that. But I just look back and think, wow, there were definitely some things. Her movement, I used to always say, it feels like she's doing somersaults versus in my belly, versus like kicking and extreme movement that my friends talk about. And now I know that that's how she is now in life. She's just, her movement is just like that. So yeah, it was, something, it was a whirlwind. So that was a little frustrating to not be validated right away. But then once we were getting that, obviously that's something that you do not want to be right about. I think for the first bit, I really just went into fix it mode. Like, what do we do? What do we do? I was Googling, which you should never do. I was finding all the things, all the therapies. Where do we go? Who's researching this? I made connection with the small, at the time, small CASK community online on a Facebook group. I met, there was only 3 cases in California, and I've met and become friends with one of the families that lives in Southern California. We've met up multiple times with our kids, and I just dove in to the community and dove into anyone I knew in my fields for specialists and therapists and teachers. And so I kind of was just running on autopilot those first few years. I feel like it was just all about her. It was, what can we do for her? Where can we go? I wanted to be fully available to drop everything. If someone called me up and said, we're studying this, get on a plane and come over here and, be our trial. That's what I did, or wanted to do, and did actually. We found a program. So about a year into the diagnosis, she had just turned 2. And I found that there's at the Virginia Tech Institute, there's a Carillion Institute that is researching CASK. And this researcher, at the time, they had a kind of like a pilot intensive therapy that they were doing that they hoped to be an ongoing long-term study. And at the time, there had only been 2 other CASK children that had done this in both different ages. And they were willing to pay for our therapy there. So we were gone for almost 4 weeks in Virginia, which we live in California. So it was quite a trip for us. And I'm so thankful for my mom, because my husband wasn't able to leave work for that long. And especially, we were a 1-income house. And my mom, as she always does, dropped everything and came with us. And we lived in a little hotel suite for 3.5 weeks with daughter. And the therapist came to our house. She was a fabulous occupational therapist that worked with Audrey 4 hours every day for 3 weeks. And it was amazing. It was the best thing that we could have done for her, and the best thing that I learned how to work with her. And she came back a different baby. So it was worth everything. It was worth, So that kind of got me much more involved in the community, and also kind of took me on my journey to my blog that I started when we were there. So I decided to document. We hadn't really made it public other than family and friends about her diagnosis. At that time, we didn't really talk much about it. And I was kind of at a crossroads about a year in, thinking, okay, I either have to be very transparent on social media or not post at all. And it was kind of a pivotal moment for me that I realized I wanted to share her story, and I wanted to help other parents, and I wanted to gain a community that I had really lost becoming a special needs mom. And my blog has helped me do that so much, because I've had so many people reach out to me that search CASK gene and that have contacted me through my blog and say like, oh, I just resonate so much. And I found this in one of my Google searches, and I love it. I love that they have someone, my friend that I told you about that reached out to me with a CASK daughter was that same person for me when I joined our Facebook group. And so I decided to document our trip. So her 2nd birthday was the week before we left for Virginia. And I had a huge post about kind of what had been going on in detail and what we were about to do, and decided to just document everything, all the therapy and everything that we were going through. And that's kind of how it started. And it was amazing, the response from our family and friends, and up to people wanting to give us money. I mean, just so much love and support. And so it's definitely changed from that. It's kind of just become my outlet now. But that's where it started, was her intensive therapy journey.
And what a valuable tool to be able to look back and have it, like you said, all documented. You had shared, and actually I want to get a snapshot of like what your life looks now, because right before we got on the call, you were kind of like, oh my gosh, like I've never been so busy. So I think other moms would love to kind of say, okay, now your daughter's 7. What does your life look like now as you are being your daughter's mother and being you, having your life and having your life experience? So give us a quick snapshot.
It's been a really interesting ride because for those first 3 years of early intervention, our first 2 for her, everything, I was at home with her all the time. She was my little buddy. We barely ever even left the house because other than going to a million specialist appointments that we had those first few years. I always joke and say we should have had a parking spot at Kaiser Specialty. So after that, when she was about to go into the school system, once they turned 3, for anyone who doesn't know, is when special education needs switch from early intervention to a school system. And that is where you create an IEP, an individualized education plan for a child with any sort of diagnosis. And they're assessed and evaluated through the school district. And a lot of the times the school district needs are very different than like medical needs for a child. They have a lot of different goals for them. So all of your therapies and all the things kind of switch over. And so right when she was going through all of that, there was not really a great placement. Audrey's disability is very kind of broad in the sense that she has a global delay. So she works hard at everything. Nothing is easy for her. She is nonverbal. She was not by any means able to walk yet. We're still working on independent walking. She's grown leaps and bounds, but her needs were just so great. But she didn't fit in a box. I mean, most kids don't, but as far as the school system, special education classes go, she didn't fit in what our county at the time was offering. And so I went to visit some of the preschool programs and was like, nope, this isn't going to work. She's not ready for this. She is going to need one-on-one assistance, which they were denying me at the time because they usually pull in one-on-one assistance for behavior problems, which my child did not have, or medical needs like a nurse, which she didn't have the need for that either. So I said, well, that's not going to work for us because she is going to be severely injured in this class that you're placing her in. We decided to wait a little bit longer and I kept her home. And during that time, we started ABA therapy and we went to the school district for speech and OT weekly that I took her to. So I was obviously very occupied with her, but it's an interesting world to live in when you have a kid with no words. It's sometimes isolating because you can't have a conversation. The way I talk to her all the time, and we have our own conversations, but sometimes I would literally not see another human until my husband got home from work, other than her therapist. So her therapist just meant the world to me and still do to this day. But as far as that continued, I was still the one in charge of everything. I was taking her to all those appointments. I was part of those appointments. I was helping with the therapy, which was so vital because I was the one who needed to work with her at home. You know, these therapists see these children once a week for an hour max, and that's not enough. So I needed to know the things that I needed to work with her on at home. So I'm so fortunate that we were able to make that work because I don't know how I would have done it otherwise. I don't know, giving her care to someone else in those early years would have been really, really hard for me. And once we weren't happy, let's say, with the school district situation during that first year that I kept her home. And so I decided, okay, she's ready for school. She was doing amazing in ABA and even started going to a clinic. So I saw the potential of her going to school and thriving and what it would mean for her. So I went back to the drawing board with her school team and said, I want the class that I visited, but she needs a one-on-one aide. So the teacher was amazing, and it was pretty low ratio of kids. They were much more developing than Audrey, which is why she needed the one-on-one just for safety. But I loved that she was going to be learning more from them. And the teacher thanked me, actually, and I'm still good friends with her today, but she thanked me for fighting for that, because she said I wouldn't have been able to give her what she needed, without that support. So she ended up with an aide. Preschool was amazing. And so she would have done almost 2 years of that before starting kindergarten. And she was thriving. It was the first time in her whole life that I was away from her. It was only 2.5 hours a day. So by the time I dropped her off, I pretty much had to go get her. But it was great for both of us. And I finally started to kind of see light at the end of the tunnel. Like, okay, I can kind of do some stuff for myself again. Just when we started with that routine is when the pandemic hit and everything was shut down. And we lost all of her services. We lost school. I just had her IEP for kindergarten transition, literally the month before school was shut down. And I'm so thankful that I did that, because I kind of knew where she was headed for kindergarten, at least. And so all of this to say, my life maybe would have looked a lot different last few years, given it wasn't the pandemic. But once again, she was back in my care full time. I was doing all the therapies online, which was so challenging. I mean, it was just a circus always. And Audrey didn't respond well to that at all. She was online therapy is not her jam. And it was not my jam.
I would like to meet the person who does
like
online therapy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we started at that time looking to move to a new school district, because we weren't happy with the options for our child at that time. And we moved to a district about 20 minutes away. We bought an amazing house in a great neighborhood that ended up having a great program for her that she's at still today. And it was the best decision we ever made. She's in like a highly intensive living skills program. The staff is phenomenal. She goes into an inclusion class every day for 30 minutes, which is so amazing. All the kids on the campus, it's a typical elementary school, K-6. They love her. She's like the superstar on the playground. They all know who she is, and that just is everything. So this past year is the first year that she's ever gone to school full time. So it's the first time I've ever been able to reassess what I'm doing with my life. And let me tell you, I don't know yet. I really don't know. Between all the COVID checks and on and off school with all the illnesses, I actually heard you talking about how sick your kids have been, just non-COVID related the past couple of months, and that it's insane, like the amount of colds and viruses and everything. So we were very cautious during when the pandemic was really bad, everything was shut down, because we did not know how Audrey would respond to it. And so we didn't go anywhere. We barely saw anyone. And so her going back to school was amazing, but she got all the germs. It felt like we were back starting square one with getting her immune system back to where it needed to be. Thankfully, it's been nothing too serious, but just constant time at home, because they can't go to school with the sniffle right now. So I'm still figuring out my schedule and my routine. I'm hoping this next year, since things seem to be a little bit back to normal as far as school goes, that we can start to, kind of make more of a consistent schedule. But I am part of a foundation that we just started in the last few years for her diagnosis. And so that keeps me busy during the week as well. But other than that, I'm just kind of holding down the fort of the house and all of her appointments and her emails. She has a huge team, sees a lot of specialists. There's always an email or a phone call or something to make. So it's a different kind of busy than I was used to from working, but it's definitely keeps me going. That's for sure. So.
Yeah, definitely. I remember actually it was this week where I was having like car difficulties. And while I was at the dealership, I'm getting calls from the specialty pharmacy wanting to deliver medication. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, of course they're calling right now. I want to hear a little bit more about your experience of isolation. I know this is very common for special needs moms. And obviously the pandemic had its impact on that. But I want to hear specifically about what you noticed about yourself when you felt isolated. And I also would love to hear what has helped the most with kind of shifting from feeling so isolated and not feeling like you were so alone.
So I think originally, my daughter is very small and always has been. So when she was younger, her disability wasn't necessarily visible to the common person. And so it was, in a sense, easier to, kind of try to do all the things still. But as she's grown and as her disability has gotten a little bit more challenging, we can't, always do all the things that all of our friends or peers are doing. I have a group of friends that quite a few of us got married around the same time and had kids around the same time. And so that has been really hard for me because, you have these expectations of how your life is going to go. And when something like this rocks your world, you just have such a different life and perspective than other people do. And although my friends are amazing humans and so are their children, it got really hard, and it is really hard for me to continue to go to the events and be around them, to be honest, because they're all at the age now where they're all starting sports and after school programs and clubs. They do things with their children on the weekends together. They go to the restaurants and breweries or whatever. They take their daughters to get manicures. They take them on ice cream dates, all the things. And we can't do that most of the time. And if we do, I shouldn't say we can't, but it's a lot more challenging, and we have to prioritize Audrey's needs. We can't just go anywhere to eat. She can't sit in a regular restaurant chair, but she's getting too big for high chairs. She can't just feed herself anywhere. She can only eat certain foods by mouth. And so we have to know, ahead of time where we're going and what we can bring for her, what she may be able to have. She can't just get up and run around at the restaurant and play like the other kids. She's with us or we're walking. Her favorite thing to do ever is walk us around in circles right now, anywhere and everywhere we go. And so the play dates and the park dates and the mom play dates don't work for us because we don't get to watch our kids play. We are on the playground with them playing. And I've heard this from so many special needs moms that I've met now, and it's the same, but I don't have anyone like that in my life. And so I've turned to the internet for those relationships, and they're amazing. And I don't know what I would do without them, but they all live across the United States and even other countries, to be honest, especially with her diagnosis. And so it's become a real struggle for me. I was a very social person before this, always had all the plans, hosted, was the one planning the events for people, always had a big group of girlfriends growing up in college, and very social and very close to my family as well. It's just hard to always put Audrey's needs in front of what we may want to do. So we have to be more realistic about what we choose to do and who we do it with and where we go. And if I'm being quite honest, sometimes it's just easier not to go. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with anyone in my life. They all love us and support us, but it's hard for me. It's hard for me to see what they are getting to experience in their journey of motherhood at this stage, at this age, this elementary school age. And it's hard for me to not feel jealous, which is something that I'm currently working on. And then it's just hard because we usually have to make the choice of one of us stays home with Audrey so the other person can go do the event, or we don't go. Or if we do go, usually both of us have to be there because it takes two people to wrangle her. So that's where my isolation has really come in. And I guess for me, connecting with other moms has been huge. Getting really involved in my daughter's diagnosis, and that community has been very helpful. I actually also go to therapy myself now to work through some of these feelings, and that's helped a lot. But it's still challenging, and I'm still working on it every day. And I'm learning to say no without guilt. And that's probably one of the hardest things. I was a big people pleaser before having Audrey, and I never said no. And so having to say no sometimes kills me, but it is just the right thing for us most of the time. And sometimes maybe it's not. We love exposing her to the community, and that's why the pandemic was really hard, because we work on a lot of things with her. Just even going to the grocery store is sometimes a lot, and she didn't step foot inside anywhere for 2 years. And so we're kind of just getting back to working on that with her, sounds and a lot of people and just all of the sensory needs that she has. Those things are very challenging sometimes. So we're getting back there slowly, but we spend a lot of time just together and with our families and outside. She loves being outside. So we are thankful to live in this state that we pretty much always can be outside. And that's our saving grace for sure.
Definitely. I feel like there are those places, just speaking of being outside, that are kind of our safer spaces to go to. Like for us, the ocean we live in San Diego, so it's easy to go to the ocean, at least when it's warmer, because of one, it's like a place where you can kind of have an outburst and nobody notices because it's like loud and everybody's frolicking in the sand anyhow. And my son happens to be a good swimmer. And so for him, it's almost like it levels the playing field so that his physical disabilities aren't as exposed as they are in, like, if we're hiking or riding bikes, or, I mean, we're not doing those things, but if we wanted to do those things. Thank you so much for sharing just kind of the whole picture of your process with isolation, and especially that, that you're using something like therapy to support you. Quite frankly, I think every special needs mom would benefit from being in therapy and or working with a coach, and even better, both in conjunction. I know that for me, as you've described this experience of what I have named evolving grief, or maybe I didn't name it, maybe I heard it somewhere and I copied it, but as your experience being a mom goes alongside your child growing or not growing in some areas that you thought they would, it opens up new opportunities to grieve. And that's why we call it this evolving thing, right? Where when she was 6 months and she wasn't hitting her milestone, that was hard, but you could still go probably to go on a walk with your girlfriends, right? But now this experience that you're having where it's like almost like you get further and further apart or able to do the things that you thought you would be doing with your friends and community. And I was just actually having a really interesting conversation with some of the gals I work with about community. And they actually were like, Kara, so like, do you just like know a lot of people? Like, you seem to have this really robust community. Like, what's going on? And I'm still reflecting on it. I'm still kind of looking at like, how is that? But one of the things I noticed is that I have a lot of non-mom related friends, which for me is really helpful. So I have a lot of friends that are coaches, and they may not be married or have kids, or even, one of them's a guy, right? So like one of my best friends is a coach that I met in my training, and he is just like wonderful because like he can hear about my experience as a mom, but it's like that's not how we connect necessarily. And so it just gives me that experience of having that intellectual, caring relationship without necessarily have to have the mom thing in the space. So I don't know. I'll put that in there because I think so often relationships come kind of as default, where we, like you said, you had friends from college, you kind of got married, and then you kind of had kids. Very similar experience for myself. And I have a lot of those friends still. And I would say like they are default relationships where they are there and I love them and cherish them, but I don't connect with them in the areas of like special needs parenting. None of them have an experience even close to what we have.
Yes.
And so that's where I think when you mention the internet is been your greatest resource for this. I think it's amazing. And I think it's an amazing way of connecting because even if you did live in the same town as some of your your special needs mom's friends, like logistically, it's still just hard, right? It's not like you guys, like you said, like being out and about is not a easy thing where you guys can gather easily. So I think you just brought up so many moments that I think moms are going to find common ground with. So thank you so much for sharing. One thing I was curious about when you're sharing is if you've talked to any of your friends, we'll call them the typical friends, typical parent friends, about what it's like for you in your experience.
Yes and no. I do have one friend that I've divulged quite a bit of information to, and she actually has a daughter that is my daughter's same age. We were pregnant together, and her daughter is the sweetest human, and she's so sweet to Audrey. And so she knows my feelings on a lot of it, and I don't think, feels my pullback, and, we keep in contact. We definitely just don't see each other as much as we used to, but I think she gets it. All of my friends would never not, include us, and they all love so much support for our family and for Audrey. But it's more about just it logistically working, like you said, just organically, forming these friendships. They're meeting all of their children's school friends' parents now, and that's a really interesting thing about special needs parenting. I don't have that at all. A lot of our kids they don't even have the same diagnosis, in my daughter's class. And so although it's nice at pickup to, chat with them and, resonate with them about life a little bit, we're not making play dates to meet up. One of them is headed to a therapy appointment after school. And
I was going to say, no, you're doing your
here.
hobbies. You're doing your hobbies of therapy and doctor's appointments, which I often think is like, that is kind of the hobby or the after school activity, if you will, of children with special needs. I want to put in something here just to say, well, there's two things. The first is I'm still forming my whole thoughts about it, but I think there potentially is a lot of magic for us special needs moms as we learn to share our story, and when I say that, like share our whole experience with all the people and not to basically hold back so much, right? Because we would never know what this experience was like unless we were living it. And so it's easy to then suggest that our friends have no idea. And there's something that I think oftentimes we think, I hear it over and over again, oh, they just don't get it. They just don't get it, right? And yeah, there is something magical about being with people that really do get it, that you don't have to explain. That's wonderful. But I think that we have an opportunity as special needs moms, if we want to feel connection, if we want to feel non-isolated, then that's actually something that we can create on our own, which sounds kind of funky because you're like, wait, Kara, like you need another person to connect with. But actually Connection is a feeling that is generated by who we're being, not by who somebody else is being. And so I just want to put this in there thinking, okay, like I know people resonated with what you shared. I certainly do as well. Just the difficulties of being out there in the wild, as I call it, with our children and their needs. But perhaps if you look at who you're being, and I'm saying this less to you specifically, but more just to the broader audience, and recognize where you've been holding back and where you have been perhaps staying where you're comfortable, which by all means, there's so much in our life that's uncomfortable. Maybe you still want to stay there, and that's totally fine. But perhaps there's an opportunity to share a little bit more openly in a conversation, or to ask something of our friends, right? I was kind of got shut down during a pandemic, but there's a friend group that I've actually known since high school that we get together every month for birthday club, or we did. Again, pandemic kind of killed it. But I recognized it was a really hard dynamic for me in managing my son. And then I realized, oh my gosh, these kids have no idea what's going on for my son. The parents have no idea how to like work all this in. And so it's my opportunity to actually make a request to say, hey, can we like have a conversation with the kids about how they can support Levi? Because a lot of them are old enough now. And can we have that conversation with the parents? Yes. Now, I'll tell you, that's vulnerable. That felt so tender to me. And so I just want to put that in there. It's not easy, but there is an opportunity. And so that second thing, just kind of looking at kind of what you shared, is like because a lot of moms, I think, are going to have the same kind of experience where it was super intense in the earlier years. And as the years go on, your time and the way that you're supporting your daughter is really changing. And you're at this place, I love how you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing next. But it's a real opportunity for reinvention of like, okay, like I was her 24/7, never do anything on my own mom. Now who do I want to be? And so it's a really fun opportunity. And I'm like, oh, I want to geek in on that with you, but I guess probably it's a different conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that. Is literally that's like my next year homework, so to speak, with things I've been discussing and working through. I'm supposed to find something out there for me. That's just for me, because I always say, I don't know. I'm Audrey's mom. I don't know who else I am. At this point, it's been 7 years of really kind of having no identity. And I know so many of my friends feel this with typical children. And, as when you become a mom, your whole life changes regardless of that situation. And just the way that they don't always resonate with me, I don't resonate with them either, because I've never had a typical child, so things that they experience, I don't either. So they may be going through things that I can't, wrap my head around either. But yeah, that's kind of my homework and my project to this next year. Find something that is unrelated to motherhood, just for me, unrelated to my relationship with my husband, unrelated to Audrey, unrelated to special needs parenting. And I literally have no idea what that is, which is hilarious. And I rack my brain every day thinking of it, but, getting into an old hobby. I do love working out, and I've always done that consistently. It's definitely my release, but it's something besides that, that's just my self-care. That's just although it helps with so many things, that is not the same as what I'm looking for right now. So
I was gonna say, well, I want to give you two things. And as we wrap up, the first thing is, as you're searching, I think it's so perfect that you put this in there, because I do think that so many moms are going to really connect with like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I want to find something for me too. So the two things I have for you: start small, right? It could be literally be like, I'm going to buy that flower at the market because it looked pretty. Right. I mean, like in the sense of like, and maybe you want to get into gardening. I don't know. Maybe you don't even know. But the second thing kind of goes in is let your heart be your guide, in the sense of like, I think so much we're trying to like think big and figure it out. Right. That's all your head. That's your thinking. And that's
right.
That has what has gotten you to this point, because that smart brain of yours has figured out how to survive and support your daughter, right? And so oftentimes I think this reinvention of us as mothers requires us to kind of sink into a very different energy and to let a different part of us guide us. And it's a new experience, and sometimes it can feel like, again, like really uncomfortable and vulnerable, but it's also very beautiful. So I want to leave you with that. And then, yeah, just as we wrap up, thank you so much for your openness, your conversation. It made it so easy. You did all the answering, and I didn't even have to ask questions. So it was wonderful for me. And just want to see if there's anything you want to share or say as we wrap up.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this. I'm a fan of your podcast. So I was kind of in awe when this actually was being set up. I was very excited and honored to be on here. But I think community is just so important. And although so many of us have so many different things going on in our lives, everyone is dealing with something, and you might not know. And so I don't know, just Audrey's taught me so much that I never, my eyes were not open to. And kindness is just number one. You never know someone, was going through when they snapped at you or when they didn't return your call or, whatever it is. And so I think just so much more aware, and I feel like I'm just more compassionate as a human being now for so many things. And I also just want to tell any other special needs moms out there that you really aren't alone as much as you feel like you are.
Yeah.
And your life is so hard and so challenging, but it's also amazing. We get to experience things that, no one else has to go through. And if you can, find your tribe, it really does make a difference on those extra hard days. If you have someone to text message to, I have a thread with a couple of my CASK moms that, we just blow off steam and, say this happened, and that without the guilt, or without making someone feel upset, or you don't want the pity, that's probably the number one thing, right? I don't want anyone to pity my life. I have a beautiful daughter. We have a lovely home. I have a husband who helps me so much and works so hard for our family. And none of that is taken for granted. So it's a journey though, and let yourself feel the feels and let yourself find people that you can resonate with on the hard days, and then find people that, like you said, can take you out of that comfort zone. So
definitely. Thank you so much again, Rachel, for sharing everything with us. If anybody wants to contact you, all of your information will be on the show notes. And so you welcome that. And so we'll see y'all in the next show. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.